In a previous podcast, we've looked at the fear of the Lord, what it means, and why we should stand in awe of God and remember that He's not like us, that we should respect Him and reverence Him and know that His power is that also of a judge. Now today we are just looking at two examples from the Acts of Apostles. The first one is about Ananias and Sapphira. That was a couple. Somebody had just given land to the apostles that to be used for the community of believers, and at that time many people sold their properties, gave the money to be distributed to the poor because the church was really in dire circumstances due to persecution. Ananias and Sapphira wanted the glory, the accolade of having given the land, but at the same time they didn't want to really give that land. So what they did was they sold their land, kept some money behind for themselves, and brought the rest to the apostles and said, "This is the money from our land." And Peter was immediately aware of the lie, and the first person that he met was Ananias. That was Ananias that brought the money. And he told Ananias, "Why would you want to lie to the Holy Spirit?" And if you read the passage, Ananias just went dead. And so he was picked up by people in the church that went to bury him. Some 3 hours after that, his wife Sapphira came, and Peter asked her, "Can you confirm that is for that money that you sold your land?" And Sapphira said, "Yeah, it is." And he told her, "You have lied. You have lied to the Holy Spirit. Your husband just died, and he was taken away, and the same thing is going to happen to you." And she fell and died. And that was just one example of a couple. They were caught lying to the Holy Spirit that Jesus said is the worst thing that could happen, and they did. And then later on, there was another case during Paul's preaching. He was talking to a proconsul, somebody that was in the Roman army, and the man was coming to faith gradually. He started being warm to the gospel, but his advisor, that was a sorcerer, Elymas, was trying to talk him out of it. And Paul said, "Elymas, this is not the way. You're going to be blind, so that you know that God is God." And immediately Elymas went blind, and the proconsul just accepted Jesus and came to faith because he saw the power of God. Many a time we talk about the power of God in, healing, even resurrection of the dead. But there is also the power of God manifested as judgment. And this is not something to be trifled upon. We have seen that repeatedly in the story of the Hebrews in the wilderness, where they had, disobeyed God's orders and were struck immediately. There are several examples of that. We are not going to go into it now, but you can read it. The last example I want to give is something that happened for real in Nigeria, in the north, where Muslims go on rampage, and burning of churches was just the order of the day. It happened so many times, and it's still happening. People are being abducted, killed. Churches are set on fire, and people burnt alive. And one pastor, an Anglican pastor in the north, was coming down south, and he was telling us what happened. That one time he was in his church, and a northern soldier, a Muslim, came armed with his rifle, and he was going for the priest. And the priest told him, you see the chancel there, the rail that separates the altar area from the nave. Told him, you see that chancel, if you cross, I cannot respond for your life. He was inside, the other one was outside. The guy just laughed and crossed and fell dead. And he was telling us casually and said, this is the way God protects his own. So many times he leaves people to die, but in that particular instance, he had decided to protect the priest. Nobody touched that man. He just died under the power of God. And so it's a reason for us not to trifle with God. Know that God is God and respect him.